What is your game design process? When you're designing a game, you're designing a complex system. So you'll want a series of steps called a process to help you build up and improve upon ideas as you create and improve that system. So I'll share my game design process with you. My game design process includes 6 stages: capture, brainstorm, prototype, playtest, iterate, and implement. These stages aren't necessarily consecutive. Different stages can occur simultaneously and stages can be repeated. The best example of this involves the prototype, playtest, and iterate stages, which generally form a cycle that is repeated multiple times as the game is iterated upon and improved. So let's look at the 6 stages of my game design process. My game design process begins with the ongoing practice of capturing artifacts. This is the stage of research, and you need to research a wide variety of fields: art, philosophy, rhetoric, marketing, mythology, literature, poetry, music, psychology, sociology, technology, economics, history, and anything else that can be combined to create a new and innovative experience. You need to know a little bit about a lot of different subjects. The world is your classroom, so get out there and learn. Sure, this includes playing games, but also so much more, like identifying the mechanics and how they balance with each other and connect to the theme and how it motivates the player and incentivizes continued engagement. It's not just playing games, it's studying them, seeing what's going on in games, and knowing how other people have handled things in their games, and being able to discern when you should use what others have done and not unnecessarily reinvent the wheel, or when you can improve upon what they've done and knowing how to improve. So this stage is a lot of research and study and inspiration, and you need a way to keep track of all of this stuff. If you have a great memory, great. But if you're like me and probably most other people, you don't. So you'll need to find a way to record all this knowledge for later use. I have notebooks, for example, full of research, ideas, and inspiration. How do you capture artifacts? Brainstorming is the stage of the process where you take all of those artifacts you've captured and combine them in new ways to come up with innovative ideas. Brainstorming starts with wild ideation, combining artifacts and coming up with some crazy ideas. However, it's not all out-of-the-box thinking. As the brainstorming stage continues, you have to start introducing limits and constraints because, well, games have limits. Whether it's a limit of space or time or technology or money or culture or the norms of the game that supply reasons to not do certain things you are physically capable of doing, or whatever. Brainstorming isn't all just coming up with out-of-the-box crazy ideas without limits. It's not just letting your mind run free. Sure, that's part of it, but it's only the beginning. You need to subject your ideas to limits and constraints, make them sweat, see how they manage, and this is when you come up with some of the best ideas. Once you have some good ideas coming out of your brainstorming, then you need to start prototyping. Prototyping is the stage where you make a quick and dirty version of your game to see how or whether or not it actually works. Don't get too invested in only one idea. Make various quick and dirty prototypes. And don't worry about making the prototype the best version of the game possible. Make it quick. My game design process subscribes to what is called rapid prototyping, in which you get to a prototype of your game as quickly as you can to see how it works. Then you test it, find the problems, and make improvements through iteration. And don't wait for a better way to build your prototype either. If you're making a video game and you can't code, for example, that doesn't mean you can't make a prototype. Make a paper prototype, use some dice or cards. Whatever you have on hand is good enough to make a prototype. This is an early stage of experimentation, and you need to make many rapid prototypes. So you've made a prototype of your game. Now you need to test that prototype. Play it yourself, invite some friends and family to play your prototype. This stage of the game design process is called playtesting. This is where you actually test your prototypes to see what works and what doesn't. And be sure to always get feedback. What did they like? What did they dislike? But also watch them play. Where did they get stuck? Where did they have fun? Always playtest your prototypes. That's what they're for. To test and get feedback, and then to improve through iteration. You've received some feedback, data, and analytics from playtesting your prototype. Now you need to integrate some of this feedback and update your prototypes. This is the iteration stage of the design process. What can be changed? What should be changed? What sort of changes will you make and test? This brings us back to the prototype stage, where you build another prototype that improves upon your previous prototypes based on the feedback you've received in playtesting. So you take that prototype and you play test your new prototype, and then iterate again, and then back to the prototype stage where you'll be cutting different prototypes that don't work out, and cutting features that don't work, and adding new features to test, and cutting features that used to work but now don't. And eventually you'll begin to focus on one prototype, and you'll keep iterating on it, and eventually make a wireframe, and a first playable demo, and an alpha build, and a beta build, and then eventually, after enough cycles through the prototype, playtest, and iteration stages, you'll eventually get to the stage of implementation. Iteration is something we do in all areas of life, not just in game design. We try something and then change it based on the feedback we get. So after going through the iterative cycle enough times, hopefully you come out the other side with a good game. You've reached the implementation stage where you finally take your game and release it to a wider audience to experience. But don't be misled, implementation doesn't mean that your game is done, because you're still finding things that could make your game better. For example, go look how the game of basketball has changed since its initial implementation in 1891. Go ahead, I'll wait. Like basketball, your game can be changed after implementation as well. Maybe it's changing a sound or effect, or adding or taking away a feature, or adding more content, or changing how many cards you deal, or whatever. So the game isn't done, totally complete and 100% perfect. But if it's good enough, put it out there. If you're waiting for it to be perfect, you'll never implement because it will never be perfect. Just put it out there. You can keep working on it, but put it out there. The ABCs of sales is always be closing. In games, it's always be shipping. Wait, that's ABS. Nevertheless, always be shipping. Sometimes being good enough is good enough, and this is one of those times. Implement your game when it's good enough. Put it out there.